Hi everybody, welcome to the Renaissance Woodworker. I'm Shannon Rogers. Welcome back to my shop. I was taught to cut dovetails just by using a chisel and a saw, just to chop out the waste. So I never really got into using a fret saw to saw out the waste between tails and or pins. And when I recently built a tool cabinet, there was a heck of a lot of dovetails and some pretty wide pins in there as well. And chopping that out just got to be exhausting, but also really was wearing my edges on my chisels. I was going back and sharpening them a lot. So I reached for this Stanley old coping saw that I actually inherited and had had around ever since I started woodworking. And I used it to saw out the waste, and I thought, this is something that I could probably investigate a little bit further because it might help me speed up my dovetailing. Up until then, I'd only ever used this coping saw for, go figure, coping exercises, mostly around the house type do-it-yourself projects where I put up crown molding and needed to cope one piece of molding to fit over the other one rather than dealing with finicky compound miters in a house built in the 60s that doesn't have 90-degree corners anywhere. So, I knew that I could use this as a curve cutting tool. I just never really used it that much. The minute I started using it to cut out waste between dovetails, I immediately saw the issues with it. The traditional coping saw has a much thicker blade, and it doesn't really fit in the curves left by my dovetail saws. So immediately I was having to do a lot of extra cutting and swooping in to cut out those joints. So I kind of quickly set it aside, and I got this coping saw. I think I actually got it at my local Woodcraft. It's available most of the retailers out there. It's got an adjustable frame to it, and you can tighten it down by turning this little wing nut on the end, and you can put in really fine fret saw blades that will actually drop down into a dovetail saw kerf and allow you to saw across the baseline. Well, this saw is fine for that, but it does have quite a bit of flex to it. The handle's really small. It's not very comfortable, and I actually find that it slips off the blade really easily. I was also snapping a lot of blades using this fret saw, and as much as I tried to figure out what was causing that, it could be I was overheating the blade too much, but when I saw with this, I see just an immense amount of flex side to side across it, and I have to believe that flex is tweaking the blade inordinately, causing it to snap. Moreover, this doesn't have any kind of adjustability to it to angle the saw off the line of the frame. So if you want to come into dovetails and saw across at an angle like this, you have to actually grab the blade with pliers and bend the blade, which I have to believe weakens the steel and may cause it to flex a little bit more anyway. So the only way you can saw keeping the blade right in line is straight horizontally. Well, the length of the depth beneath the frame, it doesn't allow you to go very far on even a typical drawer side. So there was a lot of flaws to this, but it worked, and I got more into the habit of sawing out the waste for my pins and my tails, and it helped me to not so much, I'm not going to say speed up my dovetailing, because I don't think it's another step that didn't really cut down time that much, but it certainly helped keep the edge life on my chisels going just a little bit longer, so I wasn't having to sharpen in between case sides or every couple of drawers. Well, recently, new concepts came along with this fret, and it's been talked about a couple times on the internet, and my buddy Morton did a review for this at Highland Woodworking, and then he sent me this. He mailed this same saw up to me to kind of play around with and take a look at it, and long story short, I liked it so much that I went ahead and bought it. Right away, this saw has quite a bit more clearance above the blade. You can see it's pretty much doubled above the blade here. So I've got much more flexibility in coming in and sawing directly across, and I can cover every single pin on this 4 to 5 inch wide board. So that's a nice feature. But installing the blade is really easy. We've just got little round holes in each one of the blade holders. Instead of having to come in and tighten up these little wing nuts and pinch the blade in place there, holding it in between those two plates, you just take the blade and you thread it into this hole. and it comes to a stop against the back of the mechanism, and this little black knob just turns and locks it in place. You do the same thing on the other end. You kind of have to tweak the blade and feed it into that hole, and then just twist that in place, and now the blade is firmly grabbed between the two ends. The quick adjustment, this quick tension lever on the end, is just brilliant. You just push it up into place and it tensions the blade beautifully. I need a little bit more tension on that. I want more of a kind of a ping to it. So I'll release the tension, and this little knurled nut on the end can be twisted to tension the blade a little bit more. So now the blade is really ready to cut. The cool thing is these sides, the angle of the blade can be adjustable. I'm going to release the tension, and I actually can pivot these. You can see there's some travel in the mechanism there to allow you to pivot the blade up or down depending on the direction you want to saw. And both of them, both sides, can move. And then when you tension things up again, now with the blade rotated, it's going to cut at 45-degree angles to the frame. So as I cut across the baseline, my frame won't get in the way. I don't have to worry about that capacity. With a nice thin blade, I can actually drop it down into my kerf. Just turn the corner. And saw right across the baseline. The thin fret blade allows you to just kind of drop right in there. And I can even saw closer to my baseline now. So there's a lot of precision when you can hold the blade really tightly. You don't have flex in the frame. And I've got a longer handle that at least the wood on it is grippier so that the frame's not sliding about in my hand. The adjustability here is really, really key to be able to change that angle without putting undue tension on the blade itself. So I see a pretty massive improvement between the new concept saw and this more commonly available fret saw or an old coping saw for this particular work in sawing out dovetail waste. It works, the responsiveness of the frame, this tight aluminum frame, works just as well when it comes to making coping cuts and traditional kind of fret saw and curve cuts. The one weakness I'll say is, again, the handle is much, much better, but it's a little thin. It's a little anemic for my purposes. Maybe it's because I have really big hands, but I like something that's going to fit in my palm and kind of fill up the palm a little bit more. In other words, a little bit more girth around. Well, Elk Head Tools, the guys that make these like ridiculously Ferrari screwdrivers, has come out with an aftermarket handle upgrade for this saw. It's made out of cocobolo. It's got this great brass ferrule, really, really nice width to it. They make it in a large size, which is this size, and a smaller size. So again, the fact that I do have large hands, it may turn some people away thinking, well, I'm going to need something smaller. I think you're still going to like this kind of girth that will very nicely fit in the palm of your hand and allow you to get a better grip on it. The smaller handle is going to be a little bit shorter to fit someone with a little bit smaller hands, but you still got that nice round feeling, and the weight to it puts a little bit more weight at the back of the saw and will allow you to kind of take some weight off the front here, off the toe, off the blade, to allow you to be a little bit more agile in your cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and install this Elk Head handle onto the frame saw. If you go to the Elk Head Tools website, there's actually some downloadable PDF instructions on how to install this. They say to take kind of a beater chisel, and we've all got these old chisels that have been banged up and possibly used to open paint cans or something like that. Needless to say, it's not your Lee Nielsen fine bench chisel, something you're not going to mind whacking around. And position it over the metal ferrule, and I've got the saw clamped in a vise here, and I want to chisel down, cutting through that ferrule. And it probably shouldn't take as deep a bite as I'm taking there. There we go. Not so much cutting into the wood, we're just mostly focused on getting the ferrule cut through. And again, beater chisels here. Don't do this with a fine chisel. You can bend it away and you can pop the ferrule off the handle. Needless to say, this handle won't be used again when you're done. Now there's a little pin right here in the handle, and we need to drive that through. So you need something like a nail that you can put in there and just kind of hammer through. Okay, I just took a nail, a small finishing nail, and ran it down through the hole just so that I could mark the other side here and see where it comes through. I'm going to take a nail set, and I just want to knock this pin out. There we go. So now that pin comes out, and you can separate the handle from the saw itself. The Elk Head Tools handle's got these 2 set screws that you can just back out using an Allen key, and it's got notches in the brass ferrule that line up with the frame on the new concept saw. So you just slide it in. I'm going to put the cool Elk Head Tools logo right on top, just because. And kind of slip the frame into those notches. And we tighten down the set screws. And the set screws actually descend into and through a hole that's in the frame itself. So they pass through like a pegged mortise and tenon and hold the whole saw in place. So there's no slippage here. So now it's firmly attached, and we have basically a dead sexy looking coping saw here. And the new handle is just, it fits your hand so well. So now you can tighten up the whole assembly and go right back to work. So it's, just a couple minute operation. It changes the weight of the saw, and I think in a really good way. It centers the weight right here in your hand. So this part out here, I mean, this aluminum is so light to begin with, but this is just kind of floating out here, and I've got my center of gravity right where I want it in my hand, and I've got a lot more control over it, and it just makes such a huge difference. So really, there's not much more to say other than this saw just rocks. It starts at $95. The aluminum frame is $95. There's also a titanium frame that's made, and that's double the cost. I think if it's not $200, it's like $195. So the titanium frame is going to be a little bit stiffer, but it's also going to be quite a bit heavier. So, that could be a personal choice. Doing the aftermarket upgrade of the Elk Head Tools handle adds $75 to it. So if you round it up, we're talking about $200 for a coping saw with a really sexy handle. So, it is a luxury item, but, I'm a big fan of these boutique tool makers, and I want to continue to support them. Let's not forget about the fact that there really is not another coping saw, fret saw out on the market that performs as well as this one. Granted, I haven't tried every single one of them, but I think I've got a pretty good basis of both old and new coping saws that I've worked with to tell you that it's going to be hard pressed to find one that works just this well. The Elk Head Tools handle again comes in I think it's medium or large, or small and medium. This is a 4.5 inch long handle. The next size down is 4 inches long if you've got smaller hands, or maybe just like a smaller handle. They also do make a handle that would fit a typical fret saw like this one. So if you are really happy with how this one works, but you're not happy with the handle, because I know a lot of people agree with me, this handle is just the pits, you can possibly reach out to Elk Head Tools and get yourself a nice upgrade for that. So, that's my thoughts on the fret saw. You know, what more can you say other than I went and bought one myself and I love using it. Thanks for coming by, guys. We'll see you next time.